This is episode number 8, titled Healer, Heal Thyself, with Aimee Zakrewski Clark, MA, licensed marriage and family therapist, on the Health and Wellness Encinitas podcast.
This is Health and Wellness Encinitas. I'm Lisa Thorpe with Thorpe Institute of Integrated Medicine and Intel Bio, and today I have Aimee Zakrewski Clark. La Zakrewski.
Yes,
Clark. As you have it on Facebook, which I love. I love your sense of humor. So I'm going to go ahead and let you tell our guests who you are, what you do, and then we can delve in because there's so much. I'm really excited to talk about it all.
Yes. I am licensed as a marriage and family therapist, but I definitely have a unique approach. While I was trying to earn money to get through my master's program, I tripped and fell into a massage program at a place called the Body Mind College. And I was there just to learn massage. That's it. But I ended up staying for about 4 years and gained the holistic side and then continued to be an apprentice under my teacher, Dr. Barry Green. And then eventually transferred into a holistic psychology program, of which I'm in my dissertation right now. So that's my approach. It's more integrated. Definitely want to have more of the traditional with an integration of the holistics involved.
And is it Dr. Green that you learned the 5 stages of healing from? Mm-hmm. I saw that on your website. You could share a little bit about those stages.
Definitely. One of the main things I learned from being an apprentice of Dr. Green was releasing the past. And I love the philosophy of Body Mind College because it's heal or heal thyself.
Right.
And that's still a philosophy that I live by. And there isn't anything that I will do with my clients that I haven't practiced myself. And so we had to go through our own healing process. And especially it was just 4 of us. When we were apprentices for him, and it was intense. It was intense. Like he was tough on us in an amazing way, and I loved every just uncomfortable moment of it. But that's where we went through the 5 stages ourselves, and it usually lasts about 10 months to a year, depending upon the person. And the first stage is to gain awareness. And what I learned with the more talk therapy is that we would get stuck in awareness. And so the client would be like a balloon.
Right.
They'd be a big head. Their head would be so filled with awareness, but the movement needed to happen. And so with the other stages, with acceptance and commitment of what's happening, and then releasing and replacing, and then integration, all of it brings everything full circle with the overall goal for the person to be able to fly on their own.
Great. And so they were, again, awareness, and then what was the next?
Acceptance and commitment.
Acceptance and commitment. And so is this something that you use typically? Because I know you do, you work with families, you work with children, so is this something that you see that you work with most of your clients?
Definitely. And I would say that my specialty is working with adults in all types of relationships, whether they're the parents of the children that they're bringing in or couples. And the overall intention for everyone is to gain a sense of empowerment from the inside out. And that's why I called my blog The Healing Vigilante, because I am like the accountability police. Like all of my friends will say, oh, got to hold yourself accountable. It's kind of a running joke.
I'm really glad that you brought this up already. I have it on my notes. Accountability, I think, is probably one of the most powerful things you can instill in somebody. And on a healing journey particularly, it's a key point.
Definitely.
And I'm curious at what point, now you did for quite a while, you worked in the women's prisons.
Mm-hmm. I worked with specifically a women's prison program right in Kearny Mesa, and I'm so sad that it closed because it was really powerful what they were doing. I was only an intern there at that point, but I became the lead therapist for a good portion. That really is what the whole blog was driven by at first, was my experiences there. Women were there with their children, which was very unique. And I found that really powerful for me because I got to kind of witness what it looks like when a person has, some unhealthy learnings, I call them weeds, planted in their garden, and then how they're transferring those weeds and projecting them onto their children. Because if it's not resolved, it's projected, guaranteed.
So it all starts with that awareness of
Yes.
what would be an example of a weed?
Okay, so with the prison women, they all kind of had the same weed. Like a lot of the things that are going to come out eventually in my blog, and also I created a pilot. I wrote a pilot that hopefully will get picked up one day.
Cool.
Are some of the things that I did as a therapist that nobody knows about. And it's because I looked at the way that the administration was being run, and I would stand up for myself or stand up to what they were doing, and I would literally be told to sit down and shut up. So I just started doing things on my own. So I started incorporating the holistic, and it was so exciting to do it, into my grief and loss groups, into the groups that I run.
These are group sessions that you were holding in the prison with
Yes.
women in prison, and so what you're talking about,
Yes.
integrating the mind body. Will you give us an example?
Yes. So I'll give you an example of a weed. So what I would do with one of the things we do with the releasing of the past is you have the person identify their top 10 worst weeds from their maternal or female
Gotcha.
learning. And
what went wrong with mom?
Exactly. And dad.
And what went wrong with dad?
Or the mother and father figures. And so what I did is I had the prisoners or the inmates, I ended up calling them clients, each choose their top 5 worst learnings. And then I had them do integrative work. So they would be sitting there, like almost all of them, especially like someone who ends up addicted to drugs or alcohol, because all the women there were there for drug-related crimes.
Which is a disease, and they're
Exactly.
basically imprisoned because they have a disease.
Yes, and so they were given, in lieu of like a 3 to 5 year sentence, a year to rehabilitate with their children. I mean, it's so powerful what they were doing. But the majority of them definitely learned at some point that they weren't lovable or they weren't good enough. So when it came to that point where they were feeling insecure or really vulnerable in a moment, rather than, stand up for themselves and try to gain a sense of inner power, they tried to avoid the situation or numb out. And that's where the drugs and alcohol came in.
Sure.
So not all the women were really excited about participating, but the ones that did, I would have them come, because I would do a group of 25 women at a time. I'd have them come to the center of the group one at a time, and I'd put pillows in front of them, and we'd hit those weeds out.
Nice.
And the whole process is that you want to pull the weed and then plant the flower, which a lot of therapies or, approaches will have you plant the flower over the weed or have you try to mow the weeds.
Right.
But, anyone that does any type of gardening or even a little bit knows that you have to pull a weed by the root.
Right.
And so by doing it in the body with the body-mind mechanisms, it is definitely more intense. It definitely supports
You need to get back into that emotion that was happening when it happened to help release it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that would be the intention, is to identify those top 5 weeds, and then do the body-mind approaches, different tools to help them to pull the weed and plant the flower. So remove the unhealthy or resolve the unhealthy conflict and bring in the flower or the positive, healthy thinking.
So how did you start your podcast?
My blog.
Or your blog,
right, yes.
sorry.
The
Oh, this
podcast
is a
is
podcast.
coming, but
Yeah.
well, I was lucky because I had a friend that was working with the Huffington Post, and he really believes in my pilot, which is called Boundaries. And he was so inspired by it, and he still is inspired by it, and so he really helped me. He wants to help me to get the story out, to get more for people to read more of what I write and get a following of some kind, hopefully. And it turned into something else, because at first it was just supposed to be about my experiences at the prison, and then writing about what I learned and the life lessons and how I grew. But then it turned into a whole other animal because I started to like feel myself, have moments throughout the day or throughout the week where I felt inspired or frustrated. So same thing. And I was like, wow, I have a platform now that I can write and it will be published and possibly anybody in the world can read it. And so I started writing more and more about, and all of it kind of comes down to the same thing, which is here's an issue that maybe you can relate to, and here's a way that you can be accountable and take care of yourself. Because those are kind of my things.
The accountability.
And self-care.
And self-care. Mm-hmm. So your most recent post on the Huffington Post, what was it about?
That was about Red Ribbon Week.
Oh, I saw this one. It had the great video. The principal created actually did a video of your rap.
Yes, that was very impressive.
It was awesome.
The school is amazing, and I'm really looking forward to being part of the community. But it was spawned through some frustration because I did the Red Ribbon Week single-handedly, and that's a hard thing to do. Jason, my husband, he helped me to cut all of the ribbons, so over about 800 ribbons. But I hung the majority of them up. Not the majority, actually. I hung about 300 ribbons around campus one by one. I made the signs. I created the wrap. I got this little animal, a little red hawk, because we're the Hawks. I got a red hawk, and we named him Red Ribbon Randy. And,
nice.
I had a lot of different ideas. But the challenge is that I asked for volunteers. And the principal put the announcement out, and of the 600 plus students, I got about 4 responses.
Whoa.
And they could only give me like an hour here and there, which wasn't really helpful. I appreciate that, of course, and but it wasn't really what was needed. And then I stood out in front of the school the day that I wrote the article, which inspired the article.
Yes.
And I wanted people to just write on red ribbons, a healthy message for their child so I could make a chain link. Sounds wonderful, right? Who wouldn't want that?
Right.
And I was going to hang it. I was visualizing 600 chain links that I could do across all the fence. And I got about 20. People avoided my eye contact, like they didn't want to make time for it. And I started resorting to my humor. So this one woman, she really got it because she was walking by and I said, oh, make a nice healthy message for Red Ribbon Week for your child. 3 people ignored me. It'll really help them to make healthy choices. Ignored me. And then I said, your child won't do crack if you write a message. And she turned around and started laughing. She's like, oh, you got me on that one. And I said, but it definitely was that moment of who even of all of these people were handing out ribbons, we're handing out red bracelets. Schools all over the United States are doing this. They did it when we were kids. It's been around since 1980.
Yeah.
And no one knows what it is.
We seem to have a pretty mobilized group of parents, and I think that it also comes from the staff and faculty are all pretty much on board in mobilizing things like Red Ribbon Week. Mm-hmm. So I know everything that's going on Red Ribbon Week, it gets back to that accountability, right? The teacher takes accountability, making sure all the parents are informed, and then it comes home with the homework, so we know we've got to step up and do our part.
Wonderful. And that's exactly what I would love to see throughout, is the reinforcement. And that's definitely something that I learned all over the years and everything is keep it simple and use repetition and reinforcement. Practice, repetition, simplicity. And that's the 3 things. Those are my 3 philosophies in life. They're my 3 philosophies in how I counsel. So on a weekly basis, you're seeing patients and you're writing your blog, but you also have is it a foundation or a nonprofit? The No Stress Foundation I have 2, actually.
Okay.
And so, unfortunately, the No Stress Foundation is it's more passive right now. So, 2 times a year, I'll do 30 days of stress care. I just haven't been able to dedicate the time I want to, but that is something that I'm really inspired by. And it was created because I was just doing some random research and found that stress is one of the is linked to the 5 leading causes of death.
Right.
And so it's still something that the community doesn't really acknowledge. People kind of minimize stress. They think of it as like, I'm just stressed.
It's normal. We've come to accept it as normal, and it's really not. We're really meant to live pretty peaceful, harmonic, very, be in harmony. And and you're right. We've come to accept that stress is normal, and it is leading to a lot of death and illness and pain and suffering that's unnecessary. So I'm so glad that you're addressing it. And so what do you offer for people to learn about how to handle stress or reduce stress?
The great thing about the No Stress Foundation is that while we were building it, Cat Green and Berry Green helped to create 3 really solid tools to be used. First was the stress relief breath. And next, the other was chair yoga sequence, and the other was reality awareness. I use all 3 of those still. I implement them. And actually, for my dissertation, what I'm doing is I'm doing 2 separate groups of individuals who have difficulty with conflict, who have high conflict in their life. And one group is going to be typical psychoeducation. I'm going to teach them communication skills, about some of the typical challenges and tools that are taught in marriage and family therapy. And the other group is going to be strictly using those 3 tools. And there's a underlying goal behind that, which is, obviously
to show efficacy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so that's where we're having a little bit of challenge, is that we had many people interested in it, but there are a lot of people, because we have a whole corporate program that we've created that can be completely customized for whichever corporation it is. But the majority of the corporations, because we did a focus group, gave us the feedback, which is, can you prove this?
Right.
There's lots of science behind it. There's science behind the stress relief breath, the science behind the chair yoga, and there's science behind reality awareness, which is very similar to rational self-talk, but just a little bit more powerful.
Positive thinking, essentially.
Yes, and actually just staying in reality and not going into what I call the cage.
It's whatever comes up, whether it's positive or negative, let it go.
Exactly.
Right.
There's definitely one.
It's Ganjaji.
Ganjaji.
I know. I just saw her last night at Seaside. So we love Ganjaji.
With reality awareness, I created a tool that I love called the CAJE. And it's CAJE. That's the acronym: Criticism, Assumption, Judgment, and Evaluation. And you are no longer in reality if you're in the cage. If you're in a point of criticism, or you're assuming, or you're judging a situation, or you're evaluating, the what ifs is definitely
anything negative, really. And it's so funny. Like for my kids and John, my husband, I've literally drawn a little animal in a cage. So I love that you use this, because I use this term and we didn't even know we were using this term. But I say, anytime you get angry or sad or you're embarrassed or shamed, negative in any way, you've become your animal in the cage. Mm-hmm. And you're only using your primitive old brain, and you only really have 3 choices, which is fight, flight, and freeze.
Yes.
And you're not accessing your big brain, your frontal lobe, and not capable of using your rational sense, which is also our love and our joy and the things that feel better.
Yes. So that brings me to the UTurn. Do you want to hear about the UTurn?
Yes, I do. This is a great tool.
I really like that you just said fight, flight, or freeze. There's always new science coming up. I just started learning and practicing tension releasing and trauma releasing exercises, which helps to unlock those areas when you're frozen. Unlock the frozen areas from the past and unlock you in the present. But with the UTurn, the TRE is one of the tools that I've added to the UTurn tool bucket. So the UTurn is definitely not something that I created. It's just something of the steps that I've decided to use in my practice. The first step is I used to just say breathe, and now I say either shut up and breathe or stop what you're doing and breathe. Because working with couples, a lot of the time what's happening, or even individuals, they're in a triggered moment, and they just can't stop themselves. And so that's why I've said stop what you're doing or shut up and breathe. Just zip it and start engaging.
And it helps to just get attention, right? Get the consciousness to switch.
Yes. Shift. A lot of people really work well with jumping on that voice and being like, shut up.
Yeah, right.
And then of course, like we're not breathing the majority of the time that we're in a triggered moment. And so right away, the breath will start to slow down the nervous system and unfreeze the potential freezing of that moment. So first step is to stop and breathe. The second step is to ask, what am I feeling right now? And to connect to the feeling, mad, sad, glad, or scared, any denomination of those feelings. Most people will go into a thought. So like that's really something that I work a lot with clients on, is training them to go to a feeling. What am I feeling? And then keep it simple. Mad, sad, glad, or scared.
Right.
Any derivative of those words. And then the third is, what am I triggered with? This is where the weeds come in. Because a lot of the times, if a person cannot identify, like in a simple way, what they're triggered with, they kind of end up going into a stream of thoughts.
So this really teaches people not just how to resolve things when they're in your office, but tools to go home with and change the way they're handling all of their emotional landscape.
Exactly. It's meant to, because I don't like to work with clients long term. My goal is to help them to gain a regimen to take home with them, for them to gain the empowerment of being aware, accountable, of having a trust in themselves and their self-care, and trust in the world, trust in how life is unfolding. That's ultimately the top down, like the umbrella of which everything falls underneath is trust. Is helping them to develop a sense of trust within themselves, trust with how their life is unfolding, because underneath that comes empowerment, accountability, and a strong sense of self. So
all of the positive feelings, the love and enlightenment, bliss, all of those things can only happen as a result of trust.
Yes.
So it is the foundation.
And a lot of the time we're spending with this U-turn, it's important because step 3 is, once you've identified step 3, what you're triggered with, I always have them rate the intensity from a scale of 1 to 10, how intense it is. How intense is it? And then step 4 is, what do I need to take care of myself internally? And I've created a very comprehensive chart that has different tools that they can use based on the level of intensity of the trigger. And so that's why it's meant for them to take this regimen, really get connected to what works for them, and go. So
maybe you could give an example of a couple or a client of yours who came in and how this has affected their life.
I thought about that, and I think it's probably better that I just give you an example of someone with a condition so that I don't sacrifice anybody's confidentiality in any way. Because all of my clients will listen to this, and they'll be like, she's talking about me, and I didn't give her permission.
Okay.
But I would like to talk about the condition that I see significantly, which is anxiety.
Right.
So I see a lot of people
who
that
doesn't
come in,
have anxiety at some time.
And, there's so many different definitions, but the anxiety usually is when you're challenged with being in the present. So you're either stuck in the past or you're worried about the future. So, and anxiety and depression do a nice dance together.
Right.
One usually comes hand in hand, because it seems to me like first it begins with stress. And then the person kind of hits a higher level of stress and they become anxious. And then they hit a higher level of anxiety and they become depressed and have a sense of hopelessness because they can't defeat the stress or the anxiety. And so I end up ultimately the main goal is to get them connected to what their weeds are, and then to have them really using this U-turn process. So I will give a vague example of a client that I had in the past. So usually a client will come in, I have a wheel that I use, and the wheel is physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and social. I have it drawn. It's on a dry erase board in my office. And usually a client will come in with something social, physical, or mental. But all the work is done in the emotional and the spiritual. And it takes care of those 3. So they'll come in, like, for example, this woman came in years ago, and she had continuous failed relationships. Continuous, like never. She was about 42 years old, never had a successful relationship or a fulfilling one, and constantly in abusive relationships. So right away, I want to understand her story. I want to get to know, what did she learn in her past
Childhood.
movie I mean, you'll hear, like, I definitely use movies a lot, and that's definitely something I learned from Dr. Barry Green. Greatest technique I've ever learned is watching the movie, because it helps you to really stay present and watch the clients like they're right there in front of you and being really with them in that moment, versus having my mind go to, well, maybe I should try this, or maybe I should try that, or maybe they're doing this because of this. Really moves away from analysis and into just being present with the client. So I think that's probably, if I could say, one of my biggest gifts as a therapist is I'm really present with them.
That's powerful.
So with the anxiety, whatever's left over, because we don't really care what's in their past movie that isn't in their present movie.
Right.
And so once we identify what those weeds are, and some of her weeds were definitely with her history, and I won't get into too much detail, but she came from a history where there was a lot of emotional and some physical abuse, mostly emotional. I want to share with you something that's really important. Her emotional abuse, if you were maybe watching the movie of her life, most people might not even say, they might not even notice it. But it's that her father was extremely critical.
Right.
Like, there was a lot of always or never, a lot of like tweaking of what she's done, a lot of expectation where she got to, where it ended up that she learned, don't ever make a mistake. You're never going to be good enough. These are some weeds that I'm identifying. Be perfect. You'll never be loved. Like things like that. And it wasn't because he was standing there in an overt way and saying, you're unlovable and there's something wrong with you. It was more silent, or just kind of subtle. So if she wasn't doing things in a perfect way, he would be very critical of her. And so
it's painful and erosive over time.
It is. Yeah. And so come into so the brain development is they're always shifting the numbers, but from about 0 to 3, 85% developed, and then 3 to 5, possibly 7, the rest of the brain develops.
Right.
And so if you can imagine, she's coming to me at age 42, that means that she's had, 35 plus years of this learning.
And repeating those patterns and still feeling that same feeling.
Yes. So when we do those 5 stages during the release and replace part, they are literally using their body, mind, and heart and voice to take back their power from those weeds, to pull the weeds and then plant the flowers. She can't sit in the mirror and say, I am good enough, I am good enough, or like journal that if she has weeds, because there's no space for it. She's already full.
Right.
And so that's why she has to empty out and pull those weeds before she can plant those flowers of, I am good enough, I'm perfect and acceptable as I am. So with this client, we went through the whole process, and a lot of it was the U-turn. U-turn is still part of her daily life, because I keep in touch with all of my clients. I check in probably once or twice a year just to check in, and if they're needing a reboot, they come back in, and I can't tell you how pleasing it is to see where they are and how easy they get back into the process of making the U-turn. And so that's the whole point, is to spend that time releasing and replacing, to kind of do the bulk of the weeding. And then the rest is just like making sure that you do it in a proactive way. And I focus a lot on proactive self-care, which will be my wellness tip at the end. So
I love it. Well, and I'd like to interject and just say, if there's anyone listening that has questions for Aimee or for any of us here at Health and Wellness Encinitas, you can call in. We have a comment line at 206-600-2475. So if you have any comments or questions, please call 206-600-2475. And of course, you can always go to the website and subscribe for free. You can be listening to us and never miss any show on your iPhone or your Android. And we would love to have you as one of our subscribers. So I would like to know, Aimee, tell me one defining moment in your life.
Oh my gosh. I can definitely share with you one that goes way, way back. It's changed my life. And I actually visualize myself sharing this with you. So it's interesting that it's coming up. When I was 13, I was kind of deciding, I was 7th grader, deciding between whether I was going to be a leader or a follower. And there was a group of pretty strong, popular girls. That was when I was still looking kind of like a boy.
I can't imagine that. You're beautiful.
Thank you. So I followed them. And like I played sports outside of school with this one girl in particular. Her name was Arlene. And I really liked her, but she was really like on the nerdy side in school. But I played softball with her and some soccer, and we were friends. But in school, I acted like she wasn't my friend. Oh. So one day we were doing these routines for gym. Every year we did routines, aerobic routines, and there was only a certain amount of outlets. And Karen was Arlene's best friend, and they got there early. They plugged in their radio, and my little clique got there late. They bullied me. I let myself be bullied by them, and they were basically like making fun of me and telling me that if I didn't go take that plug spot from them, that they weren't going to be my friend anymore, like lots of stuff like that. And so I was so mad at them, but I went over and I took it out on her. And I took it out on both of them, and I ripped their plug out, and I said, we're using this. And like, they were the type of girls that they wouldn't stand up for themselves. So they let me bully them after I was bullied, and then let me have it. So the next day, Karen and Arlene were going to, I think, the mall, and Arlene had stepped out to open her car door, and she was hit by a motorcycle and killed. It was very sad. So I still get chills when I tell the story. So then fast forward to after the funeral, I think I'm a little not clear on the time, but Karen came up to me at some point and in front of a lot of people slammed down these books that they had written, these slam books. We all did them back then, slamming each other. It was so silly, and I hope teenage girls don't do this to each other anymore. And she basically said to me that Arlene hated me the most because I was so fake. Yeah. And so I decided from that point on, and this was around I can't remember when it was, but I dedicated the rest of my school year and consequently the rest of my life. I got rid of those girls and just focused my friendship with Karen. And I was really there for her. I was really there for her during some very vulnerable moments. She let me be there for her. And it changed my life. It changed my life on how I viewed relationships, on how it empowered me in a lot of ways, because I decided never again would I ever let myself be pushed around or bullied to do something I didn't want to do. It created a sense of community for me. I mean, I usually don't brag about this, but it's funny. But like, I can just tell you the outcome was that I was homecoming queen and student of the year, but not because I was pretty and popular and all of that, but because for me, I like to believe because I believe I've really created a community.
And you were authentic.
Yeah.
And you were standing fully in your own empowered. You were empowered.
And it changed my life. I really feel like that's what shapes me today. That was a very defining moment. I think that that's why I do have a voice for the little people. I do want to give back to the community. Eventually, I hope that I can take funds, and like that's why I have Caldwell Clark, which is our counseling center, to support like the lower income with counseling. That's why I have the No Stress Foundation, which I hope to work with parents that have children with cancer. Like, I really want to be a positive part of my community and help the people that maybe can't help themselves. So.
You're doing a lot of great work in the community. And I just have to say, I always, as a working mom and a mom running businesses, I have so much honor, respect, and empathy for other moms that I meet. And that's how you and I know each other, because our kids are around the same age. And I think of all the things I've done, and maybe you can relate to this, nothing has been harder than raising my own kids.
Oh my gosh.
Right? We run multiple businesses, foundations, do all these grown-up things, but nothing's harder than being a mom.
Yes.
And I think it's part of that, like you said, the things that that inspire us and are often uncomfortable.
Yes.
Come from these relationships.
Yes, and my new article, which I'm writing, is it's a working title, but it's how my deepest life lessons have been from my 3-year-olds.
Right.
And I think I start the article with something like, I appreciate Dalai Lama and Eckhart Tolle and Wayne Dwyer and everybody. However, my biggest teachers have been my children.
Absolutely.
And so people can look for that coming out probably in the next couple weeks on the Healing Vigilante Huffington Post blog. But definitely it's been the most amazing experience of my life, really, to be a mother. And I'm hungry for it. So
Yay. Well, I love following you. I love seeing you on Facebook and reading your posts on Huffington. So I'll be looking forward to it. And I'm just really appreciative of you being here today. And hopefully we can do this again. And one more thing, your number one wellness tip for our listeners and for people, the number one wellness tip that you would recommend.
Okay. Before I do that, can I finish the other 2 steps of the UTurn?
Oh, yeah.
Because I feel like we may have left.
Oh, I'm sorry.
People.
Yeah.
No, that's okay. Yeah. Because this is the most important part. Because step 4 is once you identify what you're triggered with, is you want to be able to do something to take care of it. And I usually say if it's a trigger of a 6 or above, do something releasing to let it out and move it out. Pull the weed. If it's something 5 and below, you can do something grounding, like settling. Usually people skip step 4 and go right to step 5, which is what do I need to do to take care of myself externally? And that's what part of the accountability and self-care is. Everything's got to go internal first.
Right.
So, and that does lead to my wellness tip.
And everything else, it all is an inside job, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
Everything. Like, to me, I know that my clients are complete. They know they're complete with me when they have developed a solid internal self-care.
Right.
And I can tell you, I mean, I don't know how many. I was just talking about this with some of the interns that I supervise. I think I probably have over 7,000 hours of client contact. Wow. So, and it's so wonderful to know so clearly inside of myself what my end goal is with everybody, whether they come as a couple or they come in individually or they bring their child in, is for everybody who in that system to know how to take care of themselves, to know what blocks them, to know what they might be projecting on back into their present life. And to me, I really have like kind of this theory in my head. I actually wrote an article called If the Whole World Were Accountable, which I'm going to reprint on Huffington.
I saw it. I hope you do. It's a great one.
But it's definitely like if everybody were more accountable for themselves, that we could have we could all hit a level of enlightenment that could be so much more fulfilling for us to be in the same presence of each other. So I really want to help the lower educated, lower income community one day do that. That's my life goal. Because I think it's easier for like someone like myself or someone, maybe you as well, that we have the time and space to be able to take care of ourselves and maybe spend the extra money on doing that. So
you can count on me.
Yay. So my wellness tip. So I have an article on the Huffington Post. So my overall wellness tip is do something other than nothing.
Yay.
I don't like it when people, I'm not a fan of victims, but I do like to help victims go into it to thrive, not just survive, but to thrive. So when people are saying, I don't know what to do, my answer is usually do something other than nothing.
Right.
And if you read that article on the Huffington Post, and I think you can just Google do something other than nothing, and it comes right up. It has 8 different scenarios that are common that people can look at with then some guidance on how to shift that.
What you do is meet people where they are, if they're in grief or they're in shame, and you meet them where they are and give them the tools to get to accountability or willingness.
Exactly.
And then after willingness, they can get to trust, they can get to love, they can get to rational thought, they can get to the things that'll bring them up and maintain that. And more importantly, actually, is to be completely okay with the lower stuff, right?
Yes.
Because obviously, even those of us that are doing great, we still have shame, we still have grief, we still have loss, we still have apathy, and so it's just knowing how to let that go.
Yeah, that's
right?
the trust.
Yeah.
And I really love to work with the toughest clients, to tell you the truth. Like someone who thinks that the clients that are like, contemplating suicide. To me, that's the lowest point where we think, why bother? I did write an article that they did not publish the 7 Faces of Suicide, and hope I can most likely reprint that anywhere I want.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really, I mean, I went through a number of years of my life where I felt suicidal, and a couple of things, I mean, obviously having kids changed it, but because now it's just like,
give you a sense of
it's not about you anymore, right?
Right.
Like it or lump it, you're responsible for other people. But there's a couple things that for me, that I learned that really helped. And one of them was, it's okay to want to go home.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It just may not be your time yet. And to start to identify sometimes my feeling of wanting to die was just that, like, kind of knowing beyond a shadow of a doubt for me that there is a spiritual realm.
Yes.
And I miss it.
Yes.
And that I actually need to go back into it and reconnect with it, and that's part of my longing. And the other thing was, usually it's not that we really want to kill ourselves, it's that we want to kill the part of ourselves
the pain.
that is suffering. And that helps to kind of clarify what's going on.
Definitely.
Um,
The one specific wellness tip that I would love to give that links with everything that we're talking about is for everybody to develop a practice, like 2 to 3 minutes a day of just checking in.
Yeah.
Because that's what happens is we start to go throughout our day and we forget about ourselves. Another article I'm writing is called Living the Admin Life, because many couples that come in to see me, many individuals, they've gotten so caught up in the logistics that they forget about self-care and like self-love. And so I would love for everybody to every day wake up in the morning and just do a quick check-in. What am I feeling? Connect to the feeling. Mad, sad, glad, or scared. Right. And then do one thing to take care of themselves. Just one thing. Just a check-in.
Breath work is such a powerful one.
Oh, yes. If you could do anything, the stress relief breath.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the stress relief breath is, it's really works well with your sympathetic and your parasympathetic nervous systems, because the inhale's sharp, and like you inhale your breath up into the throat, and then a long sigh outward. And so it's engaging the fight or flight sympathetic system and then engaging the parasympathetic. And so definitely if anybody goes to, I actually just reposted the 7 ways to let go of negative energy on my Healing Vigilante Facebook page.
You have so many great articles. I'm so excited for more people to find out about you and everything you're doing. And so once again, it's the Healing Vigilante on the Huffington Post.
Yes.
I think that's the most important thing to let people know about. And did we say your number one wellness tip?
Yes, the number one wellness tip overall is to do something other than nothing. And then specifically is to check in one time daily, hopefully in the morning, to get your day started.
Awesome. Awesome. Aimee, thank you so much for being here. It's such a pleasure. We'll be in touch, and hopefully we'll get the girls together for a play date.
Definitely. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
This is Lisa Thorpe with Thorpe Institute of Integrated Medicine, Intel Bio, and this was Health and Wellness Encinitas.
This show was produced by John Beethan and brought to you by Alkaway.com, the makers of UltraStream, working like nature to filter, alkalize, and naturally energize water, returning it to its natural, pristine state.